In 1995, Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child would end up releasing one of my all-time favorite books, Relic. Good old museum horror, basically. But the museum monster, which is basically what the movie adaptation, which came out in 1997, would be about. There's about a 2-year gap between the release of these. This thing sold like hotcakes. It was a New York Times bestseller, so of course they made a movie adaptation. However, they didn't have the foresight that I did by the time I ended up watching this movie. You see, I watched this movie around 2010, 2011, but by that point in time, Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child would have ended up having 15 years to release plenty of novels. And I believe they were in the middle of the Helen trilogy by that point in time. The Helen trilogy would be quite a ways away. Let's see if I can remember all the novels that they wrote off the top of my head without opening this up to see. We have Relic, Reliquary, Cabinet of Curiosities. But, to be honest with you, I didn't read Cabinet of Curiosities right away. In fact, I ended up reading Thunderhead and The Ice Limit first. These are spin-off novels by these two authors in this same universe. Thunderhead brings in a character that appeared in Relic and Reliquary by the name of Bill Smithback. He is a reporter for you will eventually be a reporter for the Times. He's one of my favorite characters, my third favorite character in total. My absolute top favorite character is Vincent D'Augusta. Second favorite character is Agent Pendergast, and then Bill Smithback. So, yay! Now, they did bring in my favorite character in this. Vincent D'Augusta is one of the main characters. He's played by Tom Sizemore. And Margot Green, one of the main heroines in Relic, is played by Penelope Ann Miller. While Special Agent Pendergast and Bill Smithback are important characters in this novel, they are completely scrapped for the movie, which I feel is a major mistake, particularly where sequels are concerned, because those characters end up being more and more important with each subsequent novel. You see, the studio rushed into making this movie, but they ended up adapting it and changing way too many things. They cut out two major characters. They kept the core story intact, but they didn't have the foresight of sequels in mind. So if they were ever going to think of making Reliquary, well, you kind of need Bill for Reliquary. You kind of need Special Agent Pendergast for Reliquary, and you didn't use them. So that's a bit of a mistake. Maybe you could have introduced them in that novel, I guess. Who knows what they would have done. I don't know why they never made a sequel to The Relic, but The Relic is not by no means just a movie that they made out of nowhere. It is an adaptation of this novel right here. I'll even read the back of it for you, well, part of it at any rate. Just days before a massive exhibition opens at the popular New York Museum of Natural History, visitors are being savagely murdered in the museum's dark hallways and secret rooms. Autopsies indicate that the killer cannot be human. But the museum's directors plan to go ahead with a big bash to celebrate the new exhibition in spite of the murders, as you do. The museum researcher Margot Green, Penelope Ann Miller, must find out who or what is doing the killing, but can she do it in time to stop the massacre? Now, Penelope Ann Miller, Tom Sizemore, Margot Green, and Vincent D'Augusta are the two main focuses of this novel. They're the two major points of view you're going to be using. Bill Smithback is, I want to say, is one of the main protagonists in this novel. He helps Margot Green with information. He investigates his own things. There's a bunch of chapters where he has his own point of view, so as to say. And Pendergast, I believe he comes in roughly by this point, maybe by this point. The story, that's a fair bit of the ways in, but he's a supporting role in the first novel, and he keeps that supporting role in the second novel, Reliquary. by Cabinet of Curiosities, which I said that read Thunderhead and the Ice Limit first. Before that piece, it introduces Nora Kelly in Thunderhead, and it has her meet Bill Smith back in Thunderhead. And in the Ice Limit, it introduces Eli Glenn, who's going to come into play later on in these series, so you can read those two before Cabinet of Curiosities. You got to. So once you reach Cabinet of Curiosities, which is the third book in this series, which is going to be called the Pendergast series, a bit of a challenge to do the Pendergast series without your title character, huh, boys, huh? By Cabinet of Curiosities, Pendergast assumes the protagonist role. He is the main focus of the story. The main villain is very connected to the character Pendergast, so naturally, from going forwards from there into Still Life of the Crows, he is a main focus there. The Diogenes trilogy focus with Pendergast, because Diogenes' last name is Pendergast. I call him Diogenes. He might be actually called Dionysus. I don't pronounce characters properly. Whatever. But after the Diogenes trilogy, you get Wheel of Darkness, which is another Pendergast novel. Then you get Cemetery Dance, which is another Pendergast novel. Nora Kelly would go on to have her own novels. Like, Thunderhead was her novel, obviously. But after the Helen trilogy, which comes in after Cemetery Dance, you get into the Helen trilogy, which I still need to finish. I read Cold Vengeance. I still need to read Two Graves. But after Two Graves, we have, which is the final conclusion of the Helen trilogy, we get into Whitefire, Blue Labyrinth, and Crimson Shore. These trilogies, I like to say, are all named after colors. White, blue, red. Red, white, and blue. There you go. Alright. So after that, they ended up making another spin-off. Deep Mesa or Red Mesa or something with Nora Kelly in there. There's 2 more Nora Kelly novels out there. Either way, there's plenty of stuff. I've only read up to Cold Vengeance. So I still have a lot to do. I have collected up to Blue Labyrinth. I still need to get the future novels, the rest of them. I'm not exactly as keen on a lot of the ones after Crimson Shore, to be honest with you. Mainly because eventually Pendergast is going to get a partner called Agent Coldmoon, which I'm on the fence about that. I'll have to get to it and see what I think about it. But I like it when Pendergast is working with Vincent D'Augusta, because Vincent is my favorite character. Those two are the best dynamic duo. You cannot disrupt that by throwing Agent Coldmoon into this, Then there's the Gideon Crew novels, and they get thrown in here somewhere deeper down the line. It gets convoluted. It gets very convoluted. But it all starts with Relic. It all starts with Relic. This novel series goes insane. It's way convoluted. Kingdom Hearts level of convoluted with all these spin-offs and stuff. You got the Nora Kelly novels, the Gideon Crew novels, you get the Pendergast novels, there's Eli Glenn novels, the Ice Limit, Beyond the Ice. There's so much stuff in this franchise that it's nuts. So when they made this, they rushed into it right after this book launched. They had no idea what they were going to do with Reliquary. They had no idea that they were going to make Thunderhead, the Ice Limit, Cabinet of Curiosities, the Diogenes trilogy, the Helen trilogy. They had no idea. The studio had no idea what they were going to do with these characters, what they were going to do with their future novels. They just saw Relic and they grabbed it right away. And they made a movie cutting out major focal points and characters, vital characters in this franchise. They just carved them out of this novel. And while they made a very good, serviceable horror movie that had you not even read this book, you might actually really like this movie. You would probably call it one of your favorite horror movies of the 90s. And had I never read this novel, I would probably say that this was one of my favorite horror movies of the 90s. But I have read this novel. This is one of my absolute favorite franchises. I have collected all the way up to Blue Labyrinth. I have read all the way up to Cold Vengeance. I started reading Relic when I was in high school in 2008. Or was it even in middle school? I don't know. But long time ago, a long time ago, I was reading these books, and I was major into it. I binged them, I binged them. One year, for when I was, like, a teenager, when I found one of the Douglas Preston Lincoln Child's books, I think it was still Out the Crows. I found it in the basement of my house, right, of the house, right, and we found this book, and I'm like, what is this? I was reading, manga at the time, but I just saw this novel, this old novel, still Out the Crows. It was banged up, it's got some water damage on the cover and all that stuff, and I thought, wow, did I find a cool treasure in the basement? So I picked it up, and I read through it, and I was like, I love this thing, And then I looked up and I saw that they wrote all these other novels. So I collected Relic all the way up to Cemetery Dance. All of them. All those novels. I grabbed them all. I made a list of all the novels. And I just said, all I want for Christmas is books. So I got them all. When I was a teenager. I grabbed all those books and read through them the following year during that school year, right? I was reading all those books throughout high school. And I was obsessed with them. I fell out of favor with it. I don't know why I never finished Two Graves. I don't know. I think it's because I got into R.A. Salvatore. I was reading into R.A. Salvatore. I was getting into fantasy again. So I read about 40 novels from R.A. Salvatore. I read the entire Legend of Drennis Tall, all those novels. I read The Hunter's Blades, Transitions, Companions Codex, all of it, man. I Neverwinter. I read all of it. The Cleric's Quintet. I read all of that. All of it. The Bard stuff, the Bear, all that stuff. I read it, all that stuff. R.A. Salvatore is one of my absolute favorite authors, but for some reason, after I was binging those novels, I forgot to get back to Two Graves. And so, yeah, when I saw that Blue Labyrinth finally launched, like, it was in the mid-2010s, and I saw that Blue Labyrinth finally released, I said, alright, I'm gonna get that book, and I'm gonna reread from Relic all the way up to Blue Labyrinth. I'm gonna do it. And then I stopped after Brimstone, and I got caught up in something else again. But then I got back into it. I finished the Diogenes reread, and then I finished Wheel of Darkness. I have to get to Cemetery Dance and reread that, and then we'll finally be able to get back to the Helen trilogy and finish that thing up, and then we can get into Whitefire and Blue Labyrinth. I got Blue Labyrinth because I realized that D'Augusta finally returns. I'm like, yeah! So I'm going to read that, get through D'Augusta, enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy it. And it all started with Relic, Well, technically it started with Still Have the Crows for me, but, this book started this whole thing in 1995. They wrote this thing. In 1997 they made this. They filmed it in 96. They rushed into this project. And I feel like that was a big mistake. Though I understand why they rushed into it. The book was big at the time. They wanted to make the movie while the book was big. I just feel like they should not have changed what they did, because this could have been a movie franchise for them. But by cutting out Bill Smithback, Agent Pendergast, by cutting out major characters, they didn't leave room plot-wise for a proper sequel. Reliquary was never made, and I believe this film actually flopped. If you want, let's take a look at that. Yes, it says here that the budget was between 40 to 60 million, and the box office it made 48 million. It flopped, so that's why they didn't make a sequel. Let's see what the reception was for it. Like, what did people say about it? On Rotten Tomatoes, it has an approval rating of 37, based on 35 reviews, and an average rating of 4.7 out of 10. On Metacritic, it has an average score of 55 out of 100, based on 14 critics. Not too many critics, to be honest with you. It should be a little bit more. A mixed average reviews. Cinema Score gives it a B-. Blah, 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 blah. What else? It's just another monster movie like Alien, Species, Jaws, Predator, blah, 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 blah. Siskel and Ebert, they gave it positive reviews. Surprisingly entertaining. Now, those guys are people you want to pay attention to. If these guys say the film's good, everybody in the modern day film analyzers, everybody who does this stuff, they respect the heck out of Ebert and Siskel and Ebert. They respect the heck out of those guys. So if these guys say the film was entertaining, it is, and I agree with them. Because I liked this movie. Again, like I said, had I never have read this novel, had I never even heard of this franchise, Douglas Preston, Lincoln Child, Relic series, Pendergast series, had I never read it, and I just watched this, I would have said that it would be one of my favorite monster movies of the 90s. I would have said that, because it's actually really good. It has excellent, strong acting from Tom Sizemore and Penelope Ann Miller. They are excellent as DeAugusta and Marco Green. Dr. Frog's character is really good. There's, I believe, the Cuthbert's in it. I'm not too sure about that. I'll have to rewatch that. It's been a while. But overall, it's got good sets. I like the design of the monster. I like the story. I like the script. I like the dialogue. It's all very strong. A lot of stuff is really strong. Peter Hyams, I think that's what his name is here. Yeah, Peter Hyams, he did a really good job. I just disagree with the decision to cut out Bill Smithback and Pendergast. It's not exactly like you gave the extra runtime to these two characters and buffed out their personalities and characters more than otherwise indicated. Without the two of the main characters, this is like, here's a good analogy. Imagine you have Raphael and Donatello, but they cut out Michelangelo and Leonardo. They cut those two from the Turtles out, and they just make a movie with these two turtles instead. Fans of the TMNT universe would go like, where are the other two turtles? Where's the other two? They're not in here. And they're going to be upset that while they're fans of Raphael and Donatello, they want to see Leonardo and Michelangelo. The four have to be together. That's a good analogy, I think. At least to me it does, because those four are the big standouts in this novel to me. They were the big standouts. They were my favorite characters. They all come back for Reliquary. They are all back by by Dance of Death and Book of the Dead. They're all four of them are back there. It's the four main, it's that big core cast. And while they do split them up in the future novels, this is that first movie. This is that first book. You cannot do that to these characters. And I feel fans of these books probably might have contributed to the poor box office performance. Because if this was a New York bestsellers in the mid-90s, then by 97, a lot of the people who have read this book would have gone to see this movie, and then they would have realized, where's Bill? Where's Pendergast? And then they'll go tell their other buddies who read the book, say, hey, don't take a look. Don't give this movie a chance. They cut out our favorite characters, blah, 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 blah. And then the word of mouth spreads, and then it doesn't perform as well. And by itself, it couldn't stand out amongst the other monster movies of the 90s. So while it is a decent monster movie, it just got overshadowed by a bunch of other bigger titles, bigger names. And it couldn't satisfy the book fans. At least it didn't satisfy me. I spent half the video talking about this franchise and how I enjoyed it, more than just this movie in general. But if I'm going to be honest with you, if you've never even read this book, or any of the books in this franchise, and you've never seen this movie, I would recommend it. I would recommend that you take a look at the movie. You might love it. You really might. It might be one of your favorite 90s flicks after you get done watching it. It is competently made, good effects, good sets, good acting, good tone, good atmosphere. It's a really competently made film with a great atmosphere, good score. It just changed a lot of core things in here that would have ruined it. Even if the film performed good in the box office, Reliquary would have had to be seriously rewritten to either incorporate Bill Smith back and Pendergast into the narrative, or they would have just had to make a completely even further divergence to the original plot line going forward from there, because they didn't have Bill and Pendergast. So, and if they were ever going to do the Diogenes trilogy, that I forbid, if they were going to do the Diogenes trilogy without Pendergast, that's kind of like making a Bugs Bunny movie without Bugs Bunny. It wouldn't work. I know Pendergast is a supporting character in this first book, but you needed him. You needed to include him. You needed to include Bill. And I'm gonna say that I've said it hundreds of times in this friggin' video. That's one of the main reasons why I was disappointed with this movie. They didn't include him. They cut out 2 of the 4 Ninja Turtles. So you get the Donatello and Raphael show. No Leonardo. No Michelangelo.